Okay. So this was signed by the president in August. And as you'll learn today, there's a lot of money that's going to be thrown at individual residential properties. The problem is a lot of what's going to be thrown at us is still fairly obscure. So trying to understand it today, consider this like the first round, and we'll get into it. So we have 4 people who'll be talking primarily. We're going to start with Mike Payne, who's up here at the front. Mike. Mike is a solar installer, and we'll be talking about solar. I assume there's at least one person in the room who doesn't have solar yet.
Can you make it louder?
Okay, is that better?
Oh, somebody told him.
Is that better? Yes
It's
or no?
okay.
Okay. Then Joe Pundick will be talking. Joe is Oakmont's expert on electric vehicles, and that's a real rat's nest of stuff going on, but Joe's going to unwrap it for us. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about home energy improvement and some of the elements and the money there. Then Kimberly Beltran from Sonoma Clean Power is going to talk about the programs they currently run. And why she's not going to talk about the national programs is because nobody knows how they're going to be run yet. So we're waiting. The biggest one that's new for most of us is in fact a heat pump. Thank you. Heat pump. And so we're going to end with Mike Canonico, who is an HVAC supplier, and a couple of folks from Oakmont who have heat pumps to talk about them because they're not something most of us are familiar with. And we're particularly not familiar with what the heck is meant by this and how might we do it. So let me start. We're going to activate live transcription. Okay, is live transcription? Yep, there it is. Thank you, Bruce. Okay, so. Okay, so there are the 3 areas we'll be talking about. The problem in part is these benefits phase in over 2 years, and the qualifications to be able to get the benefits change. So consider today to be like the first immersion in what's going on, so you can start thinking the problem through, and in some cases, so you can actually do something. So we'll start with rooftop solar. This one's the simplest one, I think. There was a 30% tax credit for installing rooftop solar and batteries, and that was going to decline this year and next year, and instead it's been extended for 10 years. So if you install rooftop solar and a battery, okay, you get a 30% tax rebate. But now this is a credit. Your taxes have to exceed the amount of money that you get back. So if you had a $10,000 tax bill and you were able to get $5,000 in credits, okay, watch my bouncing ball, that means you only have to pay $5,000 in taxes. That's what a tax credit is. But if you only owe $2,000 in taxes and you have a $5,000 credit, you only get $2,000. You can't carry it over. So, yeah. Okay, we have the expert telling us we can carry it over. Okay. So the main point is a tax credit. It's not a rebate. We'll talk separately about rebates.
Right here.
Say?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mike.
Oh, you guys can finally hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Lawrence, I'm in.
We'll get to you.
I just want to make sure, George, that you guys could hear me. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
Lawrence, I'll hang out with you.
Okay, from time to time, there have also been programs that support batteries, predominantly for people who have medical needs. Those are a little more, let us say, up and down. Is that fair? Very fair. So with that in mind, let's go to Mike.
Hello. Good afternoon, evening. All right. Not very versed with talking in a mic. How many people here have solar already? Excellent. How many of you have batteries? Excellent. Good. So you're already familiar with the ITC, the tax credit that was, been around since 2006. It dropped down to 26% starting in 2020, as George said. It was supposed to tear down to 22% next year, but now it's extended another 10 years at 30%. Retroactively for any systems that are put into service at the beginning of this year, January 2022. That also applies for energy storage systems that are installed at the same time. And beginning in January of 2023, it will apply to standalone energy storage that are not charged from solar, but not till 2023. It's a dollar per dollar credit, like George said. And depending, I'm not a tax accountant, but usually if you have to do a new roof or a panel service upgrade or anything like that to accommodate the solar, that portion would also apply to the tax credit would apply to that portion of the install as well. Again, it's a dollar per dollar credit. It's not a rebate like the other part of the Inflation Reduction Act. It can be carried over for multiple years. Oh, is that better? Oh, wow. Okay. It can be carried over for multiple years. So if you can't claim it the first year, they've also made some provision around if you don't have the tax liability that you can actually sell your credit to a third party. Now, what that looks like is still yet to be seen, but it is written into it. I'm not sure if the folks on the screen. So the question was, if you have an existing solar system and you need a new roof, does the tax credit apply to a removal and reinstall of the existing solar system? It's my understanding it does not. And it hasn't previously and doesn't with the new act. Good question. That's why I will say I'm not an accountant. Check with your accountant. I can tell you that I've been in this for 20 years and many of our customers have put at least, the question was, am I confident that the tax credit can be applied to a portion of the re-roofing project if the re-roof is done in conjunction with the new solar? And my answer to that is we have had many customers that have successfully claimed the tax credit for that reason, but it's a good thing to check with your accountant. I would just add for all of you that already have solar and those that don't have solar, the other folks that are going to talk here, if you put their things in package with solar, you're fixing your costs and saving a lot of money over the long run.
Okay. Can people hear me through the, okay. Are there any questions on the audience on solar? People on Zoom? If so, unmute yourself and ask your question or put it in the chat. Okay. All right, well, we're going to move on. We'll save further questions on solar. That's the one that's easiest to understand. Joe gets the hardest one, I think. But Joe, I'm going to introduce you first. Okay, one of the things to recognize is that the Inflation Recovery Act, let me refer to that as the IRA, is that okay? Has provisions that limit some of the benefits to people whose incomes are below certain levels. You'll hear the term used, low income, okay, which is somewhat misleading, as you'll see in a minute, because the cutoff points are actually quite high. So when I'm talking income here, I'm talking, look at your last year tax form, go to line 9, which is total income. That's the number, okay? So line 9, total income. And then the other variable is how many people are in the household. We'll talk today about one person and 2 people who file a joint account. There are some other complications if some of the different combinations occur. Okay, new electric vehicles, $7,500 tax credit if they qualify. Used electric vehicles, a $4,000 tax credit. Income limitations. New vehicles, income for a joint household, $300,000. Income for a single household, $150,000. Okay? To use the used vehicle credit, you have to have income under $150,000 for a joint household, under $75,000 for a single household. So relatively speaking, while these are lower income, they're not out of line with a lot of Oakmont income. So, Joe, you're on.
Are you going to get off so I can share or? So George put down a couple of things that stole the thunder, but it's all right to repeat things. I was very lucky to find a review of the IRA for EVs online from a major law firm out of Washington, D.C. called Meyer Brown. And they did a very nice job at explaining each line of it, and I went through it with them. So the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, was signed on August 16th.
Joe,
Yeah.
I had blocked you on sharing your screen. I've now opened it up. You'll need to share your screen again.
Oh, okay.
It's open. God, you're bad at this.
So the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, was signed on August 16th this year.
You still don't have
IRA
the shared screen up, Joe.
It's not up there? Oh. I have to get the this thing off. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
So the IRA is a misnomer and will probably not reduce inflation, but it may produce expansion of sales for EVs and renewable energy. In my opinion, since 2010, when I started my first EV and a solar installation on my roof, I realized that electric cars and solar go together. And we'll talk about that more But basically, uh, we're hoping that everybody who gets an electric car, which is really clean from a pollution point of view, will use clean solar energy to drive it. That'll be the fuel for it. And it's so far, I've used it now since 2011. And it took me a while to realize what a great thing this is, because I didn't have to pay my utility a cent, except for gas side of things, the natural gas side. But basically, I've been running for free. And at this point, my wife also wanted the electric car. So now we have two EVs in our family, and which is not unusual because people have solar. It's important to know how to size the solar for an EV, because you'll definitely use more solar energy and produce more power to run it. But I kept on adding more solar to my roof, so now I have 9.3 kilowatts of solar on the roof, just about doubled what I had before. But now I have room for the heat pumps and other things that we're talking about. Now, the tax credits for EVs have some important limitations. There's buyer income limits, and EVs and batteries that must be made in North America for the most part, and price limitations on the vehicle type. So this all came from this law firm, and you're going to each can get a copy of this from Maya Brown, and Jeffrey Davis and Daniel Kelly were the attorneys who put this together. Now, the state of California has limited sales of ICE age vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, after 2035. It's kind of an elitist position, but I don't think in the long run it's actually going to work. But if you do have a gasoline vehicle, I wouldn't get rid of it, because it's going to be worth a lot of money if you can't buy gasoline vehicles in California anymore. EVs are fun to drive, great pickup, maneuverability, and stick to the road. There's minimal maintenance. Fuel is clean electricity, especially if you get it off your roof. And there's no fossil combustion required. So the whole line of getting gasoline to yourself or diesel fuel is gone. That means refineries can be limited. We don't need as many refineries as we need. And certainly the amount of oil over the long run is is required is going to go down. No more wars over oil. So these are some of the benefits that could happen with this. It also means you're in charge of driving your fuel for your own car and for the power for your own house. You don't need PG&E, especially as Mike indicated through the batteries. For most of the year, we don't need them. So it's kind of interesting what's going to be happening. But I feel that I'm in a forefront with lots of other. There's probably a couple of 100,000 people that are doing what we're doing right now. It's very exciting. So the power can come from your own solar panels. Solar investment has a positive payback. It's not just on the 35 cents a kilowatt that you're paying PG&E for solar, but of course it's $5 to $6 gasoline that you're not paying. And this is the most amazing thing. I didn't realize this at all, but Tesla announced they have built 3 million EVs in their 4 factories.
This is really interesting. I'm muted, I think.
Excuse me? Did someone else say something?
I think that was on Zoom.
Okay. So, IRA expands the existing federal tax credits. Now, the IRA purpose is to promote development and use of renewable energy, and I think it's going to do that. This presentation focuses on IRA provisions for EVs. Only battery-powered EVs are discussed. I'm not getting into hydrogen or fuel cells, and I can, but I'm just avoiding that for the time being. The important thing is that this new IRA expands existing tax credits in section 30D of the IRS code. So the new tax credits for certain used clean vehicles under section 25E and credits for commercial vehicles under section 45W, which I have not discussed. It's very complex going into commercial vehicles. New eligibility conditions and requirements that limit benefits are also part of this law. And it's interesting, at this time, there are no California EV credits at all. So you might ask, why is the government promoting EVs using tax credits? Well, the administration hopes that this will minimize air pollution. And it might help our industry in California in particular, or all over the country. EVs are now being built not only in California, but Texas, Ohio, and Michigan. And it appears that the foreign manufacturers will be going all over to the factories, including Mexico and Canada. Now, Tesla has sold 2.8 million EVs without tax credits in the past decade. So the question is, do we really need it? Well, it doesn't really matter. We got it. The government gave it to us, and we're lucky for it. Tesla has created a supercharger network of 20,000 fast chargers without any credits. And but the new law actually will provide credits for people who put in charging systems. Now, we know this is really important because the world car manufacturers have budgeted 500. This is $500 billion to try to beat Tesla, because Tesla is definitely in the forefront. General Motors, who produced the EV1 in 1990s, were way ahead of everybody, made a mess of the Bolt when they could use the lithium batteries. The EV1, people were dying and crying that they had to give up their EV1s, and there's films made on that. Now, Ford has been making EVs, but most of them have been duds over the past decade, and they've had the full tax credits, while General Motors have not. Hyundai, Kia have likewise messed up their offerings due to battery issues, but their newest cars look really good, and they're striving to build them in the United States or North America. Nissan Renault developed a competitive EV, the Leaf, which I owned for 3 years, leased for 3 years, and then stopped development until fairly recently. I don't know why they did that, but I think it has something to do with the CEO, Gossin, leaving the company. But to get this IRA passed, it's also promoting coal-fired power plants. So we got this craziness going on that we're going to save a lot on the CO2 produced from our going with EVs, but the coal-fired power plants are still happening. It's not so crazy because it's definitely going to be a transition that we have to go through. And there are a lot of coal miners that they don't want to put them out of work and whatever. So it's going to be a 20 to 50 year transition. Now, the good thing is the IRS Section 30D is an extended tax credit to December 31st of 2032. That's 10 years. So there's enough time for people to eventually all get this. When I talk to my grandchildren, they're happy for me. They're all in their 20s and 30s now. And so they want their next car to be an EV, but they really can't afford it at this point. The credit amount remains up to $7,500, but changes the manner of the limit. Vehicles meeting critical mineral requirements are eligible for half of that, $3,750. And the EV meeting battery component requirements are eligible for $3,750. I will go into what that means later. And if the EV meets both these requirements, they're eligible for the full $7,500 credit. It's kind of mumbo jumbo, and one doesn't really need to deal with it because your car that you're looking at, you'll know it because it'll all have that requirement on it. vehicle sales cap was removed. So under the prior law, there was a cap on maximum vehicles sold of 200,000. So Tesla quickly and General Motors quickly reached that limit. So people were buying Bolts, and they were great cars at the beginning, and then just fell down. But Tesla has maintained itself, and therefore is the leading seller of electric cars in the world. The old law phased out Tesla GM tax credit incentives, and the IRA eliminates maximum vehicle cap sold after December 31st, 22, which means that there are vehicles around now that can still get the credit made in this past year, but not by Tesla or GM. But you could still buy some cars not made by Tesla and GM that can actually get the credit. And if you had bought it before or got into a sales arrangement before August the 16th of this year. And so we have one very good friend, Peter. Peter, are you here? Peter bought a Lucid Air, and he put the money down, but he's not going to get delivered till 2023. So he will take advantage of that.
Yeah, I'm here. I just made my $300 deposit non-refundable. That's the sales contract I entered into with the potential to retain the $7,500 tax credit.
That's great.
But you had to do that before he signed the bill. Yeah.
Mhm. That's great that you're going to get it. You'll be one of the very few on that. Now, the Section 30D of the IRS, observations of the IRA. First of all, the manufacturer caps eliminate, is a positive extension of the credits. It's basically good for clean air. It's good for lots of people who want EVs and get it at a lower price. Limiting credits to lower income earners lowers EV sales potential, because there are a lot of rich people that would like to get the credit too, but presumably they can afford to pay more if they're rich. They don't have to get the credit. Foreign-made EVs appear to be ineligible for the tax credits, but that might get changed in country-to-country negotiations with the United States. Complex rules regarding battery components and critical minerals also limit EV sales potential and the amount of the credit. So it gives on one hand and takes from the other side, but basically I think we're gonna be in much better shape. Now, the number of EV sales I'm talking about will be the models that will be available will be shown later in this presentation. Now, the Section 25E for used EVs was probably the most interesting thing, because there's very little wear and tear really on a used EV. My Nissan Leaf that I had, I guess, is still operating. There was a news article this morning that most of those EVs are still working. So the ones that were delivered in 2011 are still working. And we have Dale in the audience right here, who has an older 5 years, 6 years old Leaf, and it's still great. The only problem is the range. It just doesn't have the range of the later units. But if you're just driving it around Sonoma County, it's an ideal car. The credit will be the lesser of $4,000 or 30% of the sales price of the vehicle, which cannot be greater than $25,000. I remember my Leaf sold, after I used it for 3 years, sold it for about $8,000. So it was quite a drop in price. I don't know what it's now, but now the credit applies only to EVs bought in 2023. These are for used EVs through 2032. Now the income limits are half those of the new vehicles. I must have skipped the slide. Let's see what it is. Anyway, the income limits for the used vehicles are 150,000 for married filing jointly or surviving spouse, 112,500 for heads of households, and 75,000 for others, including single filers. Now, the other limits, I'm not going to get into, but basically They don't want you to start a business of buying used and selling it. They don't want that. They want individuals to do this. So that's the purpose. Vehicle must be purchased for use and not for resale. The credit can be claimed only once per vehicle. So also there's another limitation of clean vehicle requirements. Must be a motor vehicle made for use on public streets, roads, highways, and which has 4 wheels. There are EVs that have 3 wheels, and they're excellent cars, except they're not covered by the tax credit. The original use must commence with the taxpayer and not for resale. The must be made by a qualified manufacturer. Must be a motor vehicle created for purposes of Title II of the Clean Air Act that gets the air pollution into it. Must have gross vehicle weight rating of less than 14,000 pounds, but commercial vehicles will get into that area. Must be propelled by electric motor that draws power from battery. You can't have a engine, like a propane engine in the back of the pickup driving the car. It has to be really done by an electric motor, and they don't want you to use propane or gasoline to provide the electricity for the car. So, and under that thing, be some questions about the Volt. You know, Mike has a Volt, which is a great car that General Motors put. Not available anymore. Battery capacity must be no less than 15 kilowatt hours and capable of being recharged from an external source of electricity. And the vehicle seller provides the report with certain data and VIN numbers. And the VIN number must be on your IRS, in your IRS form, so they can check that. Dale? Yeah. It must be the original MSRP design of the car, you know, the one from that point. I have to go back to see with something else. Yeah. Okay. Somehow I must have skipped through section 30, new EV limitations, and that's important. There is a limit on the price of the vehicle, and for SUVs, vans, and pickup trucks, it's $80,000 limit on the MSRP. And of course, a lot of these vehicles are sold above the MSRP, so that's what's going on. I don't know. But for other vehicles, which presumably are sedans, it's a $55,000 limit on the tax credit. Now the income limits, I wrote down adjusted gross income, and maybe George is right, line 9, but I thought it was the AGI on your tax filing status. George said it would be the total tax. We'll have to look into that. Now the income limit is 300,000 for married, filing jointly, and surviving spouse, 225 for heads of households, and 150 for others and single filers. I'm going to go right to the type of vehicles. Oh, foreign entities is important. Beginning in 2024, a vehicle may not contain any battery components, manufacturers, or assembled by a foreign entity of concern. Now, a foreign entity of concern, I think, may be applying to China, Russia, India, or Iran. I think the government's going to decide whether it's going to accept any of those people's cars who are anti-United States. Well, Tesla makes its own batteries in the United States, and presumably GM and Ford could also. They're setting up manufacturing for batteries. Excuse me? Well, that is something that they're going to tell us about, but I'm going to tell you that from what I can tell, the EVs that currently meet the IRA requirements in this other vehicle capacity sedans, which are less than equal $55,000. Tesla Model 3, the standard model, all-wheel drive, and long range, they probably can be under 55,000, but they may be touching into the 60,000. But in latest news from Musk on Tesla, he says he's trying to bring the price back down. He's making a really high profit because he doesn't have much competition. So the Chevy Bolt, and more models are coming from Chevy next year, but the Chevy Bolt, I think, would fit. And the Ford Mustang Mach 3 is also in this other vehicle sedan. And they're all three of these are fairly good cars. And as we talked, the Lucid Air may have some applicable models coming up. Among the SUVs, vans, and pickups, the limit is $80,000. And the Tesla Model Y standard, all-wheel drive, long range, are cars that you see all around here in Oakmont and all over the United States now. It's probably the #1 model sold. Among the Chevy Silverado pickup, I think that'll be under 80,000. And the Ford F-150 Lightning pickup just went up from a $40,000 car to about $60,000 just in the past month, but it still fits under the $80,000. And it's a really good car from what I heard. Now the Rivian has SUVs and a pickup, the RIS and the RIT, really cute looking cars, not very large, but I think they might fit under the $80,000 limit as well. So on the bottom, I have a note that foreign manufacturers such as Hyundai, Kia, Audi, VW, BMW, Jaguar, Toyota, Subaru, and others indicate they may begin to build vehicles in North America. I think I have the other issues of interest. The VIN requirement on the taxpayer claiming the credit must be included on your tax return. There are remaining issues which needs to be resolved by the IRS, and that has to do with what you brought up in the back, having to do with battery components and things like that. I think that's all going to be changed, and it's very complex. Now, no double benefit, no tax credit is available under Section 45W for commercial vehicles with respect to any vehicle that was allowed to benefit under 30D. So there's no double benefits you can get on the tax credits. And there's a no transfer option. Unlike credits under 30D and 25E, no tax credit under the commercial vehicle can be transferred to any other party. So that brings me to the end of this session. And like I said, this is an amazing new IRA, new law for us and for people who are interested in clean air and whatever. We still remember that when the COVID hit us, that March, April, and May of 2020, there was virtually no smog in LA. And how the air just cleaned up. People weren't driving. Well, if everybody's driving EVs, the same thing would happen. Thank you. And there may be some questions. You can just.
Joe,
Sure.
would you stop your share screen? I'll bring mine up. Okay, we're going to take 1 or 2 questions, but we want to go through the next section before we open it to all the questions. The one thing I would say is knowing myself, and I heard a couple of comments from the audience, okay, I'm inclined to ask, why did they do it this way when they know it won't work? Kind of questions. Ignore those, get them out of your mind. That is not your question, okay? Be happy that they have done what they've done. The real question is, which vehicles does it apply to? That's an active question, and every time you talk to anybody, that's the answer you're looking for, okay? Not why isn't yours covered? I don't mean to be, okay, but you follow me.
No, George, that's a very important point. One thing I would say is every person here in Oakmont that is interested in an electric vehicle should test drive it first. After people test drove my Tesla Y, a whole bunch of them bought it, sold it. I just sold it to them. They liked the way it drove. I didn't say anything. They just started driving it. It was immediate. And the Model 3 sold me, which allowed me to buy the Model Y. I ordered it 15 months before it was available, as soon as I test drove the Model 3.
Okay, we're going to take one quick question from the
You have a
audience.
question? Go ahead. Well, there are a company called Redwood is now recycling, but it seems that even like the Nissan Leaf batteries from 2011 are still operational, which is pretty amazing to me that they're still going. And they don't have the same effectiveness. They may lower the range, let's say. You may have to charge them up more. But if you're charging it up at home with your solar, your own solar, you're essentially not paying any dollars out because you've made the investment. Well, the guarantee is 9 to 10 years on many of the batteries. There's a recycling program going on, and that might be part of the tax credit situation as well. There's a company called Redwood. They've located themselves outside of Sparks. And the guy that started this was originally working with Musk back in the old days in LA. And they just are doing on the recycling of these batteries now. So it's kind of
Joe,
interesting.
we need to move on.
Yep.
Okay, again, this purpose is not to understand whether the environmental logics make sense, whether the law makes sense. It's what we got. Okay, and I, at least for one, am convinced I'm going to be doing more. We're going to move on to the most complex topic now. Okay, you thought that was complex. Okay, so what we have now is home energy efficiency. And we're going to be talking first about what's in this law, and then we're going to turn over to Kimberly Beltran from Sonoma Clean Power, who's going to talk about the programs that exist today. Okay, so first of all, the credits begin in calendar 2023, and they are federal tax credits for a heat pump air conditioner heater, for a heat pump water heater, for a new electric panel, for basic weatherization. If you have not done basic weatherization, that can be included. 2023. It is limited to a maximum of $2,000 a year. Now, this is the tax credit part. However, the big numbers come from the rebates. So these are cash rebates. Okay, you walk in and the cost, the retail cost or whatever it is $20,000. You get $8,000 in cash. Okay, isn't a tax credit. So these are up to $8,000 for a heat pump air conditioner, $4,000 for a heat pump water heater, $840 for a heat pump clothes dryer, $840 for an electric stove, $1,600 for weatherization, $4,000 and $2,500 for electric wiring and panel changes, and up to $8,000 in something that they don't have a definition for completely yet, but it has to do with your reducing how much energy you use in your home. Okay. Okay. Okay, these benefits are going to take a while to get settled. I've seen one estimate that says that they will not be available until the second half of next year. Why? Federal regulations have to be set. The states have to then apply to get the money, and the states have to decide how they're going to do the handling of the money. Okay, so if you think about bureaucracy upon bureaucracy, you can see why probably that's not going to be until the latter part of next year. But it doesn't mean you can't think this through ahead of time. And that's a big thing that you can be doing. Okay. Now, the point is, this all compares to the median income in Sonoma County. Okay. For a one-person household, the median income in Sonoma County is $78,950. If you have less than 80% of the median income. We're back to line 9 on your federal tax form. Okay, that's 63,160. You get 100% of the numbers on the previous page. If you have between that and 150%, which is 118,000, you get half that. Okay. If a 2-person household, you can see the numbers below. The point at which these numbers will change a little bit, obviously, because the median income number will change, your income will change, but these numbers are low enough that it satisfied what Congress wanted to do, and high enough that I think a lot of Oakmonters will find that they qualify. So we'll talk about what we know about now, and this is going to be Kimberly. Sonoma Clean Power currently offers a number of programs based on state and local programs. So with that in mind, Kimberly, I'm going to move over to you, and I'm going to put your slides up, unless you want to share them from home.
I can probably share my screen. Let me
Let's
just
do that.
get myself situated. Hi, everybody. So I'm Kimberly Beltran. I think probably several of you have seen me present in the past for the Oakmont Futures Club. So thank you for inviting me back. Right off, I want to just compliment your presenters so far this afternoon, in that the IRA is a very large piece of legislation, and there is a lot of analysis underway to try and kind of wrangle both what it provides and what we can expect it to provide over the coming years. What I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to be brief, respecting your time, and just also looking at the fact that many of you may already be aware of these incentives, and I'll give you some advice on how to learn more if you are interested or want to pursue one or multiple of the offers that we are putting forward. The good news is that our incentives, we don't have any intentions. They are limited to our resources that are available, but we don't plan on shifting them with the rollout of the new rebates and incentives that are available. That is still kind of, again, it's the devil in the details, trying to figure out exactly how we adjust so that stacking is practical and useful for our customers. Again, I'm the technical programs manager for Sonoma Clean Power. I oversee most of our technical programs and support the team. What we are doing, Sonoma Clean Power in general, is trying to turn the tide on the climate crisis using bold ideas and practical programs, accelerating building efficiency and electrification, which I believe you folks have heard me speak of before. The Advanced Energy Center is a great resource. We are open. We have had intermittent periods. I believe the last time I presented back in, maybe it was February, we had a temporary closure based on pandemic limitations, but we are back open. It's a great resource to both look at the technologies, what will they look like in my home, talk to very knowledgeable staff and interns about how they work, the benefits that you can expect by installing them, compare products, attend classes. We have a lot of wonderful induction cooking demonstrations and things of that nature, just to become more knowledgeable about what's available and whether it fits into your expectations and lifestyle. The water heating incentives recently, I believe it was effective the end of July, we had all of our incentives were increased. So you can see here that the heat pump water heater incentives have jumped to $3,100. We have some statistics here. 20% of total energy use in the home is generally on heating water. Heat pumps use 2 to 3 times less energy. And that is important, as we are, in addition to it being clean energy, being that is electricity and not burning carbon and the combustion process, They're a lot safer to have in the home. They've become extremely reliable and they are highly efficient. There are additional incentives through Bay Rent Home Plus. Those can be, researched. I can even provide a link in the chat if that is of interest. The heating and cooling incentives, I know Michael, I believe, is going to be explaining heat pump technology. I think I did in our last presentation earlier this year. Again, far more efficient. They do not use the combustion process for heating and cooling. You can save $300 as the incentives have increased to $3,000, excuse me. And that is can be quite a significant impact on reducing the cost. In addition to the incentives increasing, there is a shift in how the rebates are pursued, in that you would find a contractor, the project would need to be permitted, an invoice would need to be submitted, and an efficiency document that your contractor can generally provide. And then the check is actually payable to the homeowner who's paying for the project. Ventilation incentives, again, these have increased significantly. Heat recovery ventilators, they preheat or cool fresh outdoor air. It basically just means that instead of your heating equipment pulling in cold air, it exchanges. So it's fresh air being introduced into a closed system, but it preheats that air so that you're not, taking outdoor air that's 50 degrees and trying to bring it to 75 degrees. It actually exchanges as it brings in fresh air. It has a heat exchanger that passes the heat from the outgoing stale air and preconditions the air coming into the system. So they're great. They're filtered so that during times when outdoor air quality is not the greatest, these can be very effective tools. The incentives at $3,000, again, is a really great contribution to a project of this type. Induction cooking discounts, again, with an increase, which is really the high point that I want to comment. Induction cooking is extremely efficient. You don't deal with hot surfaces. You don't deal with the potential of combustion off-gassing, highly desirable cooking environment. They also have precision heating. They're safe and not hot to the touch. We do provide a $500 incentive for the equipment and a free cookware set, as they do require a magnetic cooking pot, so that because it basically uses electromagnetic fields to produce heat inside the pot and not on the cooking surface. We have a 0% financing mechanism. It is on bill. It is up to $10,000. I mean, this is probably, out of all of the slides, this is the one I really want to stress. This is a great opportunity to basically curb inflation, because if you need a replacement, if you are looking to do a replacement in a couple years, you don't have the the money to do it right now, you can have this $10,000 on bill financing, which basically allows you to make those upgrades today and not, be paying 3 years from now's escalated costs for that particular project. 0% interest. So you're just seeing it as a bump on your monthly utility bill. They're actually very easy to secure as well, with no credit checks. There are some other requirements, but they're very manageable in terms of qualification and eligibility. Borrowing an induction cooktop is a wonderful way to decide if induction cooking is right for you. We have a lot of people who come in and try it and decide that it's the greatest thing. It is new for people. A lot of folks like their gas ranges, and we understand that, which is why we're really promoting this program, so that we can just get as many people to try it as possible, because once you're used to it, it can be quite an enjoyable cooking environment. So, it's precise, safe, easy to clean, and those are all really beneficial to all homes, really. So This tool is the SCP Electrify tool. This is a really interesting way to look at projects you might be considering and look at your specific situation and see how much money you can save. So basically it takes inputs that you add into this software and gives you a combined energy savings over time. It's recently been revamped and more updates are coming, but it's actually a really interesting and useful tool to kind of play around on. You can find that on our offers and incentives page at either Sonoma Clean Power or the Advanced Energy Center website. So now we have a couple of other programs that are really focused on reducing peak electricity demand and shifting electricity use away from time of use or peak demand when basically solar and renewables decline in the afternoon when the sun sets. Folks come home from work and we have what we call the evening ramp. We experienced this recent heat wave. We had lots of flex alerts, and shifting demand and reducing electricity during these peak periods is extremely important for the grid reliability, and just our safety in our electric delivery in general. We have a program called Grid Savvy Rewards. You can participate in several ways. We have a behavioral demand response program where you don't need any installed technology. Basically, we send out a notice, and some of you may be participating. The notice is sent out. We are required by the California Public Utilities Commission to always call an event when there's a flex alert. So we have a couple of different times we call events. One is when we see a potential spike in the peak demand period. Generally, those events are triggered by Sonoma Clean Power. They are only sent to our participating customers in the Grid Savvy Rewards program, and they're generally 2 hours in duration. When a flex alert is issued by the California Independent System Operator, the folks who control the poles and wires and make sure there's enough electricity, we call events on those days. And the good news is that for every kilowatt hour that is reduced during the event window, at the end of the season, we credit $2 per kilowatt hour shed during the event window. So it can be quite cumulative. So we're either issuing bill credits or issuing checks at the end of October for folks who have successfully shed some peak hour energy over an event window. So when Grid Savvy calls an event and notifies, the automated demand response is basically another mechanism where a connected smart device like a smart thermostat, an EV charger, or a heat pump water heater is sent a signal, and we control the device to reduce energy during an energy savings window. Now, this program is going through an iteration and will be relaunched early next year. If you're already participating, you're continuing to get your bill credits and will actually be re-enrolled automatically when the new program is launched for automatic demand control. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, I apologize. Now we have free electric vehicle chargers. The free electric level 2 vehicle chargers are faster than the one you might have received with your EV if you recently purchased one. We actually no longer, the charger on the right, the charge point, we no longer offer. The juice box is available. Basically, the way the program works is you log on to our website, you select the juice box equipment. In the store, you pay 50% of the cost of the charger upfront. After activating the charger and enrolling in the Grid Savvy Rewards program, we reimburse you for the amount you paid upfront, which would include the sales tax and shipping. This is the programs team. So Rebecca Simonson's Director of Programs. there I am, technical programs manager, and the rest of my team. We're generally available. Programs at sonomacleanpower.org is a great way to get in touch with us. Otherwise, the Advanced Energy Center has a lot of great staff to answer questions, talk about programs that are available, and try and align you with resources that can help you and help you towards electrifying and supporting our mission in general. So thanks so much. I think that's all I have. The only last piece is that I did send in the chat, there are a couple of different websites that I provided. One is cleanenergy.gov. It's a great tool. I just started using it a couple days ago. I heard about it and poked around, and it's actually extremely useful. It allows you to plug in information about projects you might be considering, gives you some idea of when those will be launched and how those might impact you. The other is rewiringamerica.org. And again, another tool, you can plug in your zip code and your income, and it will actually walk you through the different incentives, rebates, and potential financing mechanisms under the IRA that may be available to you. And with that, I will hand it back over to George. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Kimberly. Kimberly, one quick question. If someone were to wander down to your 4th Street office, is there somebody there who can basically take the time to go through specific questions that come from today?
Absolutely. There are every staff member there either has the answer or can redirect you so that you can be connected with somebody who does. Generally, they're well staffed. They're organizing events and trainings that occur at the Advanced Energy Center. So I haven't found a time where they don't have an answer, although once in a while we'll get an interesting one and you'll get connected to me. So, and I'm very close. I'm less than a half a block. So I have a tendency to fly over there if there's a question that they can't handle.
I can assure you that if you get some Oakmonters there, you get questions you weren't expecting.
Good. I like them. They keep me thinking.
Okay, before we go to the final set of questions, I want to move over to Mike Canonico. Mike, can you talk a few minutes about what a heat pump is and how one goes about the process of, in effect, replacing what you've got with the heat pump?
Sure. My name is Mike Canonico. I am with Mac Heating and Cooling Inc. And I've invited Lawrence Winchill from Phase Energy Group to this meeting also. So Lawrence picks most of our equipment for the houses that we do or commercial projects and designs the ductwork. So the way that heat pumps work is they take the thermal energy outside and it transfers it into your house to provide heat. And for the cooling side, it takes the heat from inside your house and replaces it to the outside. So the heat pumps come in ducted forms, or you can get them in ductless forms. There's many variations nowadays. And the SEER rating, which is what the rebate program will probably go by for qualifying you for this, for these things, is no less than 16 SEER. And it can go as high as 21 SEER or even 23 SEER I've seen. So they're super efficient, way more efficient than natural gas systems. It can be misleading when they're called heat pumps. They do both heating and cooling, not just the heating. So that's another advantage to them, because your traditional natural gas systems, they require ductwork. The heat pumps do not require ductwork on some installations, not most. And as far as the programs out there, we were working with Tech Clean California already this year on the rebate program. So California has already started transitioning to heat pumps. It's already begun. And they were given $3,000 off for an outdoor unit for these heat pumps. There was qualifications, which I've already talked about. to receive that rebate. And what they did, that, and a matter of fact, that was the highest rebate I've seen from any of the companies participating in the program, including Bayron. Tech Clean California was definitely the highest. And they made it really easy for the consumers because all the paperwork was on the contractor. We just had to do exactly what Kimberly said. We had to write an estimate, put it in there, and the invoices had to have it in there that the consumer was qualifying for the rebate. So there's no paperwork required on the homeowner's end. It is all done by the contractor, and the rebate is paid directly to the contractor. That's how Tech Clean California did it, which makes it super convenient because we just take the $3,000 off the final costs, which is in the estimate and invoice, like I mentioned. Lawrence, would you like to add anything else to this that I might have missed?
Nothing other than heat pumps are a great way to heat and cool a home, from space heating to water heating. And when you look at the actual energy input to energy output, it's much greater than what is a traditional, say a gas system or air conditioning system. And then when they're coupled with solar, they do very well. So there's good reason that we're seeing the IRA and local programs such as Sonoma Clean Power offer incentives to getting homeowners to make this transition. So we believe it's a good move, and we're always here to help ask any questions about what's involved and cost and process.
If I may ask a quick question.
Sure, go ahead, George.
Mike, talk me through the timeline of the process. If you were to come in and make an evaluation at my home, how long would it be before you would be able to do an installation?
I would say within a week. We would come in, we assess your home, write an estimate upon approval. I mean, usually we could be in there within 3 days. Once I get approval from a homeowner, I pull the permits right away. So that's the first process of it. And then ordering the equipment. Yeah, usually we can get it done within a week. So,
Okay. We have at least 2 people here who have heat pumps. Chris, did you want to take just a minute and yeah, you can grab the mic that's on the
uh-oh.
and why don't you introduce yourself?
Is that Chris Jones?
Okay, yes, it is Chris Jones.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Yeah, I know that guy in the back. He's a problem. Okay. Heat pumps, what a wimpy name. I mean, yeah, no wonder no one knows about them. It's got no sex appeal at all. So, shall I do that all again? No, I won't. Okay. In my view, heat pumps make little or no sense without solar panels and battery backup. A friend wanted to reduce his use of gas for heating to combat global warming, as I recall, so installed a heat pump without solar. He certainly got rid of his PG&E gas charges, but his additional electric use now furnished the highest cost here. In January of this year, his electric charges, primarily for heating, were $409. His gas charges $23. We installed solar panels and battery backup in June 2021. Our PG&E electric bill is $10 or so a month. The details are impossible, or certainly for me to be able to figure out. Does everyone get one of these crazy things right? Forget about it. You're right. But gas home heating was in the $200 to $208 a month range. At that point, we needed to replace our 30-year-old AC, and in addition, the gas furnace was undersized for our home. On cold evenings, it struggled to get the house to 68 degrees. I learned of heat pumps through a friend in the Oakmont hiking club who has a Tesla, and he pointed out an all-electric home, which he invited me to visit. When I arrived at his home, I was bemused to see that he was stacking firewood, which he somewhat sheepishly explained he only used when it was really cold. Another hiking club pal who just installed a heat pump also has a gas furnace in addition to the heat pump, which he explained the HVAC contractor insisted he needed for, quote, colder days. That is, 2 heating systems to do the job. A well-regarded HVAC guy came out to give us a quote, no gas furnace needed, but he insisted we would need, quote, heat strips, quote, in the heat pump air handler. Heat strips are basically electric heat elements as an electric oven to quick start the heating. These solutions seem like defeating the whole purpose of a heat pump. Are heat pumps up the job or not? But in the end, this time through my cycling pals, I heard about heat pump solutions that actually worked. I also was told of some pretty expensive approaches in the $25,000 to $35,000 range, and was myself quoted $31,000. In the end, we paid around $13,500, not far different from what one might pay for a new air conditioner and gas furnace. And thanks to the just passed Inflation Reduction Act, we'll get a $2,000 tax credit in the near future. We've now had our heat pump since late February. Our total PG&E bills for gas and electric combined now in the $25 to $35 range. Based upon these results, we'll save some $1,250 a year on heating. And remember, this is at today's gas prices. And we're still generating about 20% more power on an annual basis than we use. That's my take on heat pumps. I'm for them if the contractor knows what they're doing.
Okay, so where'd Jeff go? You want to add anything? Okay, Jeff also has a heat pump. I think the point here is there's a lot of richness over the next 18 to 24 months that you can look at, you can deal with. If it isn't obvious, virtually everybody who's been talking is going to say you need solar. If you don't have solar, you ought to ask why not, because it's very hard not to come up with a good argument. That then gives you the basis for the electric vehicle, and it gives you the basis for switching over to something like a heat pump, okay, and pretty close to getting off the grid, which you don't get off the grid in the heat of the heart of winter, okay, because you that's your hard part. Okay, now having said that, all of this is in flux, but it's a good time to stand back and start planning it through. The government is now throwing the better part of as much as $50,000 at you to have a more environmentally friendly, lower cost system. And one of the things we just don't talk about a lot in how much money the government's throwing at you is the fact that almost all of these are really reducing your energy bills.
Thank you, George. So this is Jeff Newman. I put a heat pump in last November, and when they first installed it, there is an obscure setting on the thermostat that they had set wrong, so that if I had it set to heat, regardless of the temperature, it was running the fan and circulating house air. And so that actually used a lot of electricity that I didn't really need to use for the first month and a half that it was in, until I really understood what it was doing. Called them up and said, hey, why is it doing this? And they said, oh, there's an obscure setting on the thermostat. Let us come out and do that. And so now it does use less energy than it did for the first month and a half. But very roughly, I have a home here in Oakmont, moved in not quite 5 years ago. My house inspector said, you have 1 winter left on this roof, not 2. Just so we're being very, very clear, you need a new roof. And it was also a good time to put on solar. So I did the roof and solar at the same time. 12 solar panels, so 3.6 kilowatts, back to Joe's numbers. Very roughly, I make about 3 times as much electricity as I use in the summertime. And now with the heat pump, I use between 2 and 3 times what the solar is making. So I'll say that again. In the summer, I'm making triple what I'm using. So 2/3 of what I'm making in the summertime is going back onto the grid. But in the winter time, I'm using 2 to 3 times with the heat pump what the solar is putting out. So the solar production, of course, goes way down in the winter time because of the low angle of the sun, short days, rainy weather, all that kind of good stuff. But that's just kind of my mental anchor for how this is all working. At the solar installer's recommendation 4 years ago, I did not put in batteries because at that time, the technology of the batteries was clearly moving very quickly and the pricing was moving very quickly. I have not gone back to put in batteries. Really don't have a reason to, as long as we have the net electric metering. So I overproduce in the summertime and they net that against the electricity that I'm buying in the wintertime. So in the net, annually speaking, my electricity is just about free. I do pay the $10 a month minimum delivery charge, which is my contribution to the power lines and all the helicopters that we've been watching for the last few months. And personally, I think net electric metering is insane. The idea that a kilowatt at 10 o'clock in the morning when the sun's high and consumption is low is worth the same as that same kilowatt at 8 o'clock in the evening is truly crazy. I think what we're doing with net electric metering is realistically unsustainable. But that's as much editorial as I'll give. Thank you.
Okay, I know I've stalled off on questions. Do we have questions here in the audience? Okay, you're on again. It depends on what you need to know. Are you talking about solar? Well, 3 categories. I think we're talking 3. We're talking, well, 4. We're talking solar. You want to talk to a good solar installer. Mike will volunteer to come out and talk to you. Okay. We're talking electric vehicles. Call Joe. Okay. And he and his team there are a bunch of Oakmonters who have electric vehicles. We'll talk to you about what's going on. And then the third one is you go down to the 4th Street outlet of Sonoma Clean Power. They'll talk about induction heating. They'll tell you about how heat pumps work and all that stuff. If you want to move forward, you want to talk to an HVAC installer, and I'm sure Mike Canonico will be glad to come out and tell you what his team can do for you. But I think we're at the point where it's moving forward, okay? And that if the money that's involved from the federal government is important, then you have to keep your eye on how that's managed as a program, okay? And be aware of it. But for most of us, this is going to be a 2-year process.
Okay, so there's a heat pump on this wall in this building. So you go out beyond the pickleball courts and they look very much like air conditioners. In fact, it looks exactly like the one I have at my home. And so that is on the outside. You have then the furnace you have inside. They'll just be thrown in the trash. They'll get rid of all the gas that goes to the furnace and the venting, and they'll replace it with what they call an air handler, which is your present actual heater has what they call a blower. So the air handler is a more sophisticated gadget, but it moves the air around in the home. Well, I'm not an installer. Probably that, I don't know. Probably the furnace closet, yeah.
Yeah, you could I add one more thing, Chris?
Yep.
Yeah, you can install them in furnished closets and in garages and attics. They make units for that. And the other thing I wanted to add about that heating and cooling your homes. The heating and cooling energy consumption in your homes is the highest energy consumption you can have. you can use up to 40 to 56% of your energy consumption on heating and cooling your home alone. Now they came out with these really good efficient heat pumps. A lot of manufacturers have, but Mitsubishi makes a really, really good one, and they've been around a long time. I just wanted to add that.
Okay, these are heat pump systems outside the home. Okay. Don't look a heck of a lot different in many ways than one you're used to looking at. Okay, does that look familiar, Mike?
Yes, that is a Mitsubishi one. So that is actually a hyperheat one, which is used in colder environments like Tahoe. But they have another version that's not hyperheat that you can use in regular homes that is more than capable of doing the job. And as you can see, they're not such an eyesore like traditional air conditioners. They're slimmer. Some of them are taller and some of them are shorter. Some of them only have one fan. And it just doesn't, it's not such an eyesore like traditional heating and air conditioning units usually are.
So when I did this at my house, my heat pump looks a lot like that. It's
It
about
looks
this
like-
tall, it's about that fat, and about
Yes.
that wide. Apologies that I'm doing visuals, which the people joining us virtually are not able to share. It is dual fan. It's really very quiet. You can stand 8 feet away from that thing downwind of the fans and hold a normal conversation. You're going to be getting a little bit of a breeze, but you can hold a normal conversation that is really quiet. They did put the air handler where the furnace was on a stand in the garage. So really what's in the garage is the same volume as what was there when the gas furnace was there. They used the existing ducting, so there was no rework on the ducting. There's just the new box outside where the air conditioner used to be. Mine is, yeah. So my garage and my heat pump are at opposite ends of the house. There's just the copper lines that go underneath the house from point A to point B.
And the other thing about these things, George, is their variable speed. So, so it may come on at high speed in the initial process, but eventually they ramp down to a lower speed, which means less energy usage. I mean, basically